All right, we are live.
Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to the Injective quarterly webinar with Token Relations. My name is Namsan, and I'm one of the research analysts at Token Relations. And today I have Injective's head of BD, Mirza, and the ecosystem marketing manager, Rocky. Welcome, guys.
How's it
Howdy.
going?
Glad to have you both. Before we get started, just want to give some background and context about Injective for those who don't know. In the recent quarter, Injective has seen a ton of updates that bridges DeFi and TradFi, which is going to be the main bulk of this discussion. Arguably, the biggest announcement that came this past quarter was iAssets, which I'm sure you guys can do a better job of explaining, but it's basically a financial tool that will look to bring real-world assets on chain. And through this, actually, users can trade stocks that are part of the Mag 7. And we'll definitely dive deep into that. And so, um, to start off, actually, the first question at a high level, I want to know why Injective deployed iAssets and what you guys saw as the gap to fill the market in.
Yeah, I can start and Rocky can also chime in. So hey everyone, thanks for having me. That's a really good place to start. So we felt as though, first of all, real world assets have existed for a long time, right? In the past, there were different iterations of RWAs, in my opinion, namely synthetics, as far back as 2020, I want to say. We had synthetic assets on projects like Mirror Protocol or Synthetics itself, Synthetics with an X. Um, There was a missing component still. Most of the people that were looking into RWAs were just creating a representation of a real world asset on chain, right? So let's say you have a real estate asset or a treasury asset, right? And you're representing it on chain. You keep the asset with the custodian and you basically mint a replica of that asset on chain. We felt like that kind of only takes you halfway, right? So basically, the issue we foresaw and the issue we saw from users is, hey, why do I actually need this on chain, right? So why do I need sort of a representation of US Treasuries on chain when the vast majority of people trading these assets can just do it through their local bank or Robinhood for no fees, actually, right? So it's not bringing any additional value. So we really thought hard and conducted probably hundreds of different user interviews about what do people actually want in crypto, right? And when you think about the only real projects that have found product market fit, at least in my opinion, one of the only new primitives that have found product market fit have been assets such as perpetuals, right? Like primitives such as perps, because it effectively allows you to trade assets 24/7 and allows you to trade on leverage, right? Which is technically missing from spot assets or traditional assets. So what we realized is, what if we brought this sort of thinking process to RWAs, right? So instead of just creating replicas on chain that honestly is boring, right? Like no one wants to trade stocks on the same clock that the US markets trade, right? They want to trade on leverage, they want to trade 24/7. So iAssets was created as a primitive to basically bring more functionality and more utility to RWAs. So how can we actually add the value of crypto to RWAs instead of just not to be mean, but as a marketing announcement to say, hey, we created this asset on chain as an RWA, right? Because that sounds nice on paper, but if you look at most of these assets, right, no matter which one you look into, like US Treasuries, etc., that have been brought on chain, when you look at the number of active wallets engaging with those assets, it's like a couple hundred wallets. It's like nothing. Like no one's actually engaging with the products. People are talking about it on Twitter and acting like it's a big deal, but in reality, the users are not there. So that's kind of the reasoning behind why we even created iAssets. It was basically a way to say, hey, everyone clearly agrees that certain assets are restricted, like whether it be stocks, ETFs, indices. How can we bring it on chain while adding more functionality from day one so that when a user comes in, not only do they get to access that real world asset, but they also get to access it 24/7 with leverage and actually have it be composable with the rest of crypto, right? You can now use that asset in lending protocols or use it as collateral to borrow money, which is great, right? Because then you really unlock the value of DeFi and what it has to offer. So that was like a long spiel, but that's sort of the reasoning and how we got there.
I love it. Rocky, anything to add, or did Mirza just kind of like steal the show from you?
He stole the show a little bit. I was going to touch on basically just the composability of it, but he kind of outlined what that looks like. But I guess to really hammer home the point is just like we are giving these assets more utility, right? And Mears really hit on nobody just wants to essentially just trade stocks on chain with no added utility, right? There's no added benefit, there's no added value. So it's like why would people even do that? But we are really kind of leveling up this whole ecosystem with regards to giving them more opportunities to essentially use their assets in more creative and different ways that you wouldn't have been able to do in the traditional finance world, or if you were able to do, it's a much more complex or extremely expensive sort of opportunity to do so. So we're really trying to help sort of democratize the whole accessibility of these assets that we've sort of now coined as iAssets. And obviously we'll get into more, but obviously you'll see a lot more from iAssets in the future as well.
No, yeah, I love it. To go back to Mirza, your point, you said that RWAs and perps they already exist on chain, and so you guys both you work in BD, Rocky, you work in marketing, and so I want you guys to explain how Injective adds this unique value prop that any other blockchain can't offer.
Yeah, I guess the main value prop is twofold, right? From a developer perspective, what we saw is a lot of chains are very fast and very cheap, right? In my opinion, that's been beaten to death, that sort of concept. But what developers actually were missing is time to market. So right now, if you look at any development process, it typically takes months, if not like more than a year, to build a decent application on any chain, right? Because you have to write all the code, you have to get it audited, you have to test it, etc. And by that time, it's not only extremely time eh, like consuming, but also very expensive, right? Most people don't really get to do that and have all of that time or money. So what we thought about is how do we create an ecosystem or a chain that not only is fast and cheap, right? So Injective today is one of the fastest chains out there, one of the cheapest chains out there. But on top of that, how do we make it easier for developers to deploy? So what we created actually are these plug and play modules. You can almost think of it like Wix or WordPress, right, from the Web2 world, where you can sort of plug and play these different templates together to create your applications. So now you not only have the benefits of this really great ecosystem and chain, that's highly performant, but also you are increasing accessibility in a huge way where users can come in and plug and play these modules together to create things like dexes or lending protocols or prediction markets in the matter of hours. I've seen people create like a new dex on Injective in 2 hours. And that's not really possible on any other chain. And now we're taking it a step further. So a big initiative we've had for the last year or year and a half is introducing multiple virtual machines under one umbrella. So not only can you come in via WASM, but you can come in via EVM as well, or by Solidity. And you can have those dApps be composable across the entire network. So the same liquidity that exists on WASM can be accessed by the EVM developers, right? And from a user perspective, it's hugely beneficial because then you get the best of the Ethereum world, you get the best of the WASM world, and you have it under one umbrella. So you only have one wallet and you can access it all. And on top of that, all the institutions that we're onboarding are providing liquidity to this one central limit order book that we created very painstakingly. So from day one, you have liquidity. So when you build a DeFi app, the hardest question almost always is like, hey, we built this amazing app, but there's no liquidity. And then people often find that they need to get market makers or institutions or other things. Like we've done that heavy lifting over the last sort of couple of years. Some of the biggest guys in the space are providing liquidity to the network, whether it be guys like Selene or IMC or Jump Crypto. They're all integrated onto this chain and providing liquidity that any user or developer can leverage. So not only can you build your apps very quickly, right? Because you can come in with any virtual machine, you can come in with any language. You have these modules, and you have the liquidity, right? So you get your apps up and running and it's functional. And from a user perspective, you have this whole world of applications that are unrestricted to you. And the idea is we're going to, I don't know how much I can share, take this a step further this year, and make it much easier than ever to create these applications where sort of novice coders or novice programmers can come in and create applications on top of Injective.
I love those points. I like how you mentioned twice. You said Robinhood because probably every trader knows what Robinhood is, and then you mentioned Wix. How you comparing it to already existing platforms that people already are used to. And so that actually was part of my next question because why did Injective decide to go into creating these platforms that are just easy to use and people are already used to? Is your interest to onboard like the next million users and be interest of retail investors, or do you want like institutions or crypto native folks to really use Injective, or just kind of like the whole spiel?
Okay, I'll let you go first because I feel like I've been talking a lot, and then I'll go.
It's all good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a two-prong approach. And I do just want to kind of revisit your previous question real quick and just add maybe two things, and then we'll jump to this one. Number one, Mirza really highlighted kind of this shared liquidity, and I really want to kind of hammer home the point of like this is really to address the cold start problem that we see in many other ecosystems, right? And the cold start problem is, you know, dApps need users, but users don't want to use dApps with no liquidity. And so it's this issue of like chicken and egg issue where, in order to attract liquidity, you need users, and it's kind of a vice versa. And so you end up having a hard time kind of starting out in the world. So that was sort of the main genesis behind this whole idea of this shared liquidity layer is kind of getting that from the start. Like Mirza said, you could build a DEX in 2 hours and tap into the entire liquidity across the entire chain versus trying to attract new liquidity that, you have to do all your own marketing and all your own connections. But instead, this time you can just tap right in and you're ready to go. And then another thing I just want to touch on too on the user side is that Injective has like purposely, I guess, focused and niched down to just focus on financial applications, right? I think that's a unique sort of vertical that we've really seen a lot of traction in, and we are like 100% dedicated to just the kind of the finance vertical, right? Bringing new users on chain to be able to trade, to live their whole financial lives, right, on chain, and so I think with a lot of other ecosystems, they get the issue of like trying to boil the whole ocean, right? They're trying to be everything to everyone, and then they end up doing everything just okay, and not one thing great. So those were just kind of the 2 points I wanted to make on the previous question. But jumping to your current question, I mean, we're really taking a two-prong approach here, Namsan, and it's one of those things where, we're onboarding institutions. We have several relationships with market makers and a lot of other big institutions that are coming on board. We saw last year with the release of our BIDL index product that got some good traction. For all those that don't know, the BIDL index is essentially tokenizing the BIDL BlackRock stablecoin, and basically you're able to bet on like the supply changes of that, which was pretty cool. And that was an institutional only product that now we've kind of opened up to the rest of the world to be able to speculate, to take one-sided bets on the supply changes of that. And then this year we've seen just like a ton of interest from institutions on both on our iAssets, from a market making perspective, and as well as things like Libre, which are introducing tokenized funds on chain. We just released our tokenized fund with them a couple months ago, and there should be sort of other funds deploying in the near future. But that's sort of it on the institutional side. And then I would say more on the retail side. Again, we've been talking about iAssets this whole time. That's been a real winner for us on the user side of things. We're seeing just a lot of traction on that side. Mostly it's been ETFs and individual stocks that we've seen a ton of traction on. And in the near future, you're going to see a lot more sort of intricate and unique assets being launched that were otherwise either restricted to retail investors, or again, very complex to access. It required a lot of capital and just otherwise sort of not available to the retail world. And we're sort of trying to democratize all of that and really obfuscating the barriers that traditionally presented themselves.
Oh, I think that's really well said.
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna ask Miz if you had anything to add, but it seems like Rocky hit home on everything.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I'll keep it very simple. So basically, to answer your question, the idea is to make it easier than ever to deploy applications on top of Injective, because ultimately, what do people care about? People care about trying interesting products, and let's be honest, making money, right? Or making yield in crypto, right? Those are the two things people really care about. So by lowering the barriers to entry for developers, so letting them code in any language of their choice, letting them come and build very quickly and iterate on products, it makes it much easier for the development lifecycle to be vastly decreased, and launch new applications, which is hugely beneficial for end users, right? So what do end users want? They want yield, or they want new ways to make money. What do you need for that? You need liquidity, you need applications. So we take care of those bottlenecks, right? So we make it very easy for applications to launch. We make it very easy to access liquidity on chain. And by integrating all of these different institutions and by only focusing on finance, we provide the most liquid network in crypto today, right? So there's no hassle, there's no issue. You can access any asset you want, and you can access interesting assets, right? Which we will get into. iAssets are just the tip of the iceberg, but Rocky's right. We've seen tremendous traction with just that asset class, with over $1 billion transacted in just, I would say, the last 6 weeks. Which is pretty insane, right? Because they're novel new products such as on-chain Tesla or the on-chain S&P 500 index. But people really want these products on-chain, and we want to be the venue for that.
Love to hear that. Kind of addressing what like very recent news is crypto regulation in America. I think uh whatever like your political affiliation is kind of you just have to address that everything's becoming more regulated, and so Injective is a global brand. You have users all around the world, and so how do you see the traction coming from different regions like U.S., Canada, Asia, and then also is there any regulatory challenges that you kind of foresee or you're coming into or that you see happening right now that uh, Injective is doing?
Yeah, I guess this is a really good question. So oftentimes we think about only the U.S. regulatory landscape, right? Especially as like all of us are in the U.S. But yeah, you're right. Injective is a largely global brand. U.S. regulations, in my honest opinion, again, regardless of your political affiliation, they're getting a lot more lenient and a bit better, because previously, I would say the administration was just very recalcitrant in terms of like wanting to even engage, right? But now we don't really see that. We see more sort of open arms, or at least like willingness to engage in dialogue, which we didn't really see previously. And I think that that's already a huge leap forward from where it was before, where people were sort of like trying their best to hide or like stay away from engaging with the government, which I think is now conducive to like just any form of innovation, right? You need government support, you need legal pathways to be able to I don't know, conduct great work, right? Like, especially if you're a good actor, you need that. So I think like a lot of crypto people think about this entire regulatory sort of environment in the wrong way. Like they want to be unregulated and they want to hide from the government. I think that's wrong. For any sort of technology to thrive, you need proper gateways. Like the internet initially was very much like in the sort of dark side of things, or in the gray zone where the government wasn't regulating it. But I would say some of the biggest companies sprung up only after proper regulations were introduced, because that's when a lot of the smartest people can actually engage, and also users can engage without any restriction. So that's my take on the US. But Injective, in my opinion, is again very global today. So I think only 30% of the developers, etc., on Injective today are US based, based on our metrics, based on what we see. Because after all, Injective is a permissionless network, so it's sometimes hard to locate where people might be building from. But I would say like it's a solid one third, one third, one third split between Europe, Asia, and the US, right? I would say some other countries are even worse than the US in terms of regulations, right? Like, for instance, in the UK, it's very difficult to even access assets, right? So, one of the things we also do at Injective Labs is also help operate Helix, which is one of our flagship decks. And we have to geo block Helix from countries like the UK and also Canada, because their licensing laws are so stringent, where they basically say that it doesn't matter if it's permissionless, you need a license anyways. But it's like a double-edged sword, because you can't get a license unless you KYC users. But as a DeFi platform, you can't KYC users. So it's like you're kind of stuck in the middle. So lots of companies end up saying, okay, like we'll just block all of the UK and Canada, which is such a shame, because you have so many great users there, so many great people. So I think it's going to be a constant dialogue and struggle. But I'm very
Oh no, do we lose him?
I think we might have lost Mirza. Mirza, you're frozen if you can hear us.
All right, let's. I want
Oh, he's back.
Rocky. Oh, he's back.
yeah, it was just loading or like spinning for like 10 seconds. Okay, I don't know what just happened. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so
Oh my God.
what I am sort of bullish on in general is being able to see the US sort of lead by example. So if the US passes proper regulations, I very much believe that countries like the UK or Canada will change things. Sorry, do I keep getting stuck, or like what's happening?
Just another time, but you're good. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, okay. Weird. All right. Not sure what's going on. Thanks. I'm in the office, so we actually run like a lot of our servers through this office, so maybe the Wi-Fi network is getting overloaded, but I will ping and ask.
No worries. And just to add on to that, I thought one thing that I want to bring up here, stories we've heard from traders, users, developers in other countries is, just based on I think what we're really focused on is access. It's really opening up access to the globe. And so I'll give you an example. Like iAssets are that answer to how do we give more access to global users to access, US and international stocks. And that's just like one example for someone in Nigeria or in Indonesia to be able to, within a matter of a few minutes, basically sign up and start trading any sort of stock or ETF or asset that they want, all in a very easy manner, with leverage 24/7, sort of all these benefits. And I think we've really sort of cracked the code when it comes to these users. Typically, like the traditional finance system really doesn't serve some of these markets. And if they do, they're plagued by like long waiting times, right? Like getting approved for an account and then like waiting for my account to be approved and going through this KYC process. And it's like this multi-prong approach that's, dragged out. It could be hours, it could be days. And, really at Injective, we've really tried to simplify that process and make that process as seamless as possible to be able to onboard these users that have otherwise been, dare I say, restricted from accessing the sort of global financial system, and giving them an outlet to be able to make these trades, to be able to access all of these wonderful applications, to be able to lend, whatever it might be. That's sort of been our focus, and I think that's where we've seen a lot of traction, a lot of stories from users saying like, thank you for making these products, and like we want to see more. We want to see sort of a greater breadth of new assets coming on chain that otherwise we wouldn't have access to.
Yeah, I totally agree, guys. I think access point is a huge topic, because I live in New York City, and so there's a ton of stuff that I can't even access based on where I live in. I think providing access points to one of the largest exchanges in the world, the New York Stock Exchange, and then the Max 7, you got Netflix as well. I think Injective is probably driving the mainstream adoption for RWAs in crypto, arguably. But shifting gears, because you guys have also done uh, iAgents, and I know that was last quarter, but that's also a narrative that you guys honed in on. And so, in conjunction of iAssets and also your role in the AI sector, how do you kind of see those two categories meshing together? Do you see any like cross connection at all, or are they like very different?
I think the cross connection goes back to the ease of use. So I think AI is a tool, right, that we utilize to empower sort of our financial assets. a really cool example is when we launched this AI index. So it was called AIX. We basically combined some of the largest AI tokens, like let's say Fetch AI or BitTensor, with some of the largest AI stocks or AI category stocks. So let's say like NVIDIA, and we put it in one index, and we actually used iAgents, which is sort of our native AI builder, to create that asset on chain. So we use prompts, and you can see a video that's demoed live to create that market on the Injective chain, which I think is super innovative, right? Because that basically means what we wanted to illustrate effectively is any end user, even if they're a total novice, can come in and generate a new market and a new asset class on top of Injective with just a few simple prompts, right? So that's what I see us as like in terms of like AI, because everyone's trying to sort of jump on this bandwagon. But I always think whenever a new narrative or anything comes out, it's like, how can it mesh with finance? And can it sort of help propel our sort of story or our vision forward? Because Rocky's right. Like, we're not trying to boil the whole ocean. We're not trying to go after everything. It needs to tie in well with the category of finance. So in the past, when other things were happening, so let's say like NFTs were really hot, right? Or the metaverse was really hot. It didn't really make sense for us as a financial finance focused blockchain at the time. So there always needs to be sort of an angle where we can fit or mesh together finance with the category. And I think AI can fit in quite well, because at its truest sense, it's just a tool for people to sort of make their life easier or simpler. And that speaks volumes to us, because that's what this entire blockchain is about. Like, making it easier for developers to come in and making it easier for users to come in. So if AI can help do that, then that's great. And what iAgent really is, it's a platform for other people to come in and experiment and build new products on top of Injective. So what we didn't want to do is introduce an entirely new sort of like app. What we basically want to do is provide a platform where people can come in and create applications or products on top of Injective much more easily. So that's what iAgent, or our AI angle, was really about, starting sort of, I guess, 6-7 months ago.
Anything you want to add, Rocky, about the AI stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've seen some adoption on, other like Mirza was saying, iAgent is basically like this foundation or SDK that anybody can utilize. And I think we've seen some projects, starting to do some early experimentation with regards to, developing different sort of trading bots and things of that nature. So more on sort of the interesting trader side and leveraging that. I think what's most interesting to me is obviously on the agent side of things, they can tap into data that is like real time. And so, like, for instance, if I develop a trading bot, I can, have it set up to, immediately react to different market sort of news cycles, things that come out based on sort of like Fed data or any other sort of data. And so I think we're seeing some early experimentation on that side of things. And obviously AI agents can respond, infinitely quicker than I can to market events or breaking news events. And so I think we're seeing some early experimentation there. And I think, in the future, could we see a future where on-chain is a majority of AI agents trading? I think we potentially could, to where I can just have my own, basically AI agent assistant that I've basically programmed to say, I like these sorts of things. I like the Mag 7 stocks. I feed it various, RSS feeds from, the various mainstream media platforms to basically take in, data based on these stocks. And then it can trade sort of real time based on that information, right? Maybe there's a leak of, potential acquisition or something, and I can be one of the first to sort of be in there to trade. I think that's quite interesting, and I think we're seeing some interesting things there. But yeah, that's I think where we'll see a lot of traction on Injective, and I think moving forward with sort of iAgent and the experiments that happen there, we're sort of pushing the envelope forward to kind of realize this vision of a AI agent future that is not only on Injective, but is potentially, cross-chain, taking advantage of opportunities on other ecosystems and things of that nature.
I love to hear it. I think all of that said, then you guys really establish yourselves that you offer these tools, but everything goes back to your overall mission statement, which is being the blockchain for finance that has like no barriers. It's not only on one chain, it's cross chain. And I was mentioning that I live in New York City, and New York City is like the capital of crypto and finance. And you guys are actually hosting the Injective Summit next month in New York City. And kind of just to give some alpha for the listeners, can you guys share some themes or announcements that attendees can expect at the summit? And how do you see events like these actually creating momentum for the Injective blockchain and reaching new users in institutions?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. But yeah, it's really exciting, right? So this is the first ever time we've hosted the summit in New York. We did a first iteration last year in Bangkok, which was a blowout success. I have to be relatively tight-lipped on what I can share about like announcements we'll be making, but on an overall level, expect new product launches and announcements, like pretty major ones. I think some of the biggest ones in history, at least in my opinion. And on top of that, expect to see really great leaders from both blockchain and TradFi coming to the summit and participating. And we saw a glimpse of that in Bangkok in Thailand last year, where we had speakers from Binance and all the big companies across crypto, and even certain like regulators, right? And we're going to see a lot more of that. And we wanted to host it in New York because our HQ is in New York. And like you said, it's the finance and crypto capital of the world. Um, it's interesting, right? For us, everything goes back to the community, right? So even when we design the summit, it has to be very community oriented. We never want to be a blockchain that's just a bunch of suits, because that's literally the type of system we're trying to replace or change. So yes, we will have speakers that are very prominent from the world of TradFi and the world of crypto, but at the same time, we'll always keep our community in mind, and have community corner and ways for us to engage, and give out merch, and just create like more of an overall sense of belonging, which I think is often missing at these like sort of like suit and tie conferences. So our goal is to sort of harmoniously mesh together these two almost sometimes disjointed worlds, but we've always done it well, where we're working with the biggest institutions, but at the same time, we're hosting meme Mondays with our community, right? And talking about memes with them, because that's what it's all about. And I think that's what makes crypto so different. It's allowing those community members to come and access the same level of assets or same level of um, sort of yield or incentives that TradFi players often have access to, right? So it's really about breaking down those barriers. And the summit will, in many ways, just be a symbol of that, or a representation of that overall goal that we have.
I think Mirza said it very well, and I'll just add a couple of things. You know, our first event, our first sort of major event, right? This summit in Bangkok. By the way, Bangkok is about as far away from New York as you can really get, and that was, our first kind of foray into the large sort of conference style, retail focus. Like, how do we kind of show up for our community, and really kind of bring together this IRL event for ambassadors, for community members, for traders, users, to all kind of come together and meet each other in person, because I don't think there's really a better sort of venue. Like you can't get the same connection online that you can in real life. And so it was definitely a smashing success, our first Bangkok event. And so we're trying to basically transplant that event to New York City, and then add in, more of kind of an institutional and potentially sort of like government official angle. So that way, sort of retail users can get exposure and an understanding of like what's happening on the institutional side, like what is happening on the regulatory side that otherwise they might not have had sort of insight to or heard from directly. And so we're super excited to kind of bring this like right to the heart of the financial capital of the world. And without saying, I think too much, I think definitely iAssets will be a big focus there. And I think, to Mirza's point, we'll see some new primitives, launched at the summit. And again, I don't want to say too much, but effectively just be prepared for sort of sparks to fly, and we're super excited to kind of be bringing our you know conference style event to the US, that has finally sort of opened their arms to being able to host these large scale events. Because call it 2 years ago, we would be probably crazy to launch a large style crypto event in the US. And so we're excited to kind of bring it onshore and see everybody again this June 26th in New York City.
Love it. Rocky, you work with ecosystems directly, and I think going back to the part where summit events are for the community, you want to put your developers out, you want to showcase their work. And since we're hosting in New York City, there's going to be a lot of connections to like institutions, TradFi firms and companies. How are you guys approaching the fact or the need of putting your developers in front of like these audiences? And I know it's a very diverse range of people that are coming in, flying into the city. But what specific initiatives or tools are you guys doing to make sure that developers are getting like the word of mouth?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things here. Number one is obviously just providing the space for them to, be in the same building as these movers and shakers of industry, right? Whether it is an institution, whether it is a government official, they're able to hear directly from the horse's mouth, whether it's on stage or even, after the talking session, to be able to go up and shake their hand and just, inquire more, or to be able to basically show them what they're working on. I think that's like square one of this whole thing. That's really the reason we're doing it, is to like bring everyone into the same room to get on the same page. And then I think, secondly, we want to provide sort of a unique experience when it comes to showcasing the various sort of ecosystem dApps that are on our chain, to be able to, have visibility on, what's happening sort of behind the scenes that might not be sort of apparent or marketed widely, just due to sort of proprietary things going on. But I think it's just, how do we get everyone to all come together and to be able to provide a venue, where people can kind of share ideas and to sort of move the ball down the court when it comes to ecosystem development and things of that nature. So Mirza, I don't know if you have sort of other details to provide, but I think that's kind of square one and square two for us.
No, that's well said. And not to be cliche, but it's often about doing things that don't scale. I always have loved that quote, but in after I sort of started in crypto and joined Injective, it's been 5 years now. I really learned this in practice. Some of the best developers or builders we found is not by sort of like hosting hackathons or doing like the very pedestrian like things that crypto projects often do. It's about actually like engaging with real people, right? Like whether it be in random Discord chats and talking to them at 2 in the morning to figure out like any support issues that they might have, because those are the people that ended up building some of the best and long lasting applications and communities on top of Injective. um, Even some of the best hires I've had have been from like random Telegram chats and Discord chats. They haven't been through normal job posting. So I think that's the beauty of crypto. And if you think about a traditional company, right, think about a traditional startup or even a mega startup, right, or a mega tech company like Facebook today, you're never going to see Mark Zuckerberg sort of talking to some random person on Discord from like the Philippines, right? You're never going to see that. But in crypto, you will see that, especially for projects who care. Like no one is in some proverbial like ivory tower above anything. So sort of like me and Eric and Rocky and Julie and all the other team members are actually in the trenches, talking to these people, finding out what they want, and developing the project and developing sort of the overall ecosystem based on their needs and their wants. And I think that's actually beautiful, right? We're not actually having to think about what the people want and just building for the sake of building. We're actually like interacting with them and working with them. So I just wanted to add that component. And I think that's what makes Injective really special. And I often get this feedback from developers like, hey, why do you want to build on Injective rather than these 50 other chains? Oftentimes, it's not that we are really fast or really cheap or we have this liquidity or this infra. It's because we actually made that personal connection and really like we're for like there at their beck and call at any time of the day. And that goes a long way because in most ecosystems, you don't get that. You're one of like 100 projects and the CEO will never talk to you, but at Injective, they will. So yeah, and we plan on continuing to do that, even if it's getting much and much harder as we're continuing to scale, but we keep that core sentiment and that core tenet sort of embedded throughout the company culture and throughout the way we work.
Sticking to your core, I like that. I like to hear that. I'm a big community guy as well, so hearing that Injective is always about their community is great. Kind of asking you guys' personal opinions about this. As crypto cycles happen, we have DeFi, we had like NFTs explode, and now we're having AI. Is there anything that you guys think that is an untapped potential that you think can become the next narrative in the space that is a really good use case for Injective, and how does that? What do you think that can apply to iAssets?
I mean, I personally think just based on the traction we've seen in Q1 that sort of iAssets could be that sort of next narrative, right? I think we've seen a lot of success, with both ETFs launched on chain, now individual stocks, Mag 7, so on and so forth. But I think there is, so many different assets that have sort of these untapped potential. I think, one of the things that I think, again, without sort of giving away too much, is just like markets that are otherwise sort of obscure or doesn't have like a traditional market, or traditional sort of market forces. So I could think of different commodities that maybe fit into that basket. Anything from like soybeans to like uranium and everything in between, I think is quite interesting. And it's really just being able to provide, like we sort of spoke about before, not only just providing that on chain, but then also giving this like programmable type liquidity or composable liquidity to be able to say, okay, we have now tokenized, gold. How can I now then, collateralize that, borrow against it in 5 minutes? And that's just like doesn't really exist in the traditional financial realm. And so I think it's like, how can we kind of double down on providing more of those types of assets, and then also giving the other side of things, which is how do we make it even more composable or more programmable on the other side, where we can do very exotic things that again would otherwise be restricted to restricted access to some people, or otherwise very complex and very expensive to do so. So I think it's just like doubling down on those types of things.
All right, Mirza, what do you want to see built next on Injective that is an untapped potential?
Yeah, I want to see so untapped potential, not to oversimplify it, it's always about like allowing users to access more yield or new ways to make money. I want to see easy to use RWA launchpads or vaults on top of Injective. So let's say being able to earn yield on your Tesla stock, right? Because right now we've introduced things like Tesla stock or Apple stock on chain. How can you earn yield on it, right? Just for holding it? How can you use it as a collateral pair for other assets? That's the type of innovation I would love to see. And I think we're far ahead, not to be biased, far ahead of everyone in terms of getting these things done. Most people are just talking about just the first step of like bringing stocks on chain. We've already done it. It's live and it's on mainnet. So now the next step is, now that we've brought these interesting primitives and allowed people to trade on leverage, how can we actually enable the core promise that has led to real product market fit in crypto, which in my opinion is still DeFi. It was the first like real product market fit where people were coming in droves, earning yield. I want to see that for RWAs, and I think that's going to happen this year. And it will take the entire space to the next level, because it's not just about creating representations of stocks or ETFs on chain. It's about allowing people to have new ways to earn money Not to oversimplify, but I think it just boils down to that.
I like it. What type of equity do you want to see next to be put on chain? Because you guys put on the Mag 7, which makes sense, obviously.
Yeah.
Biggest tickers. Do you guys want to see more like ETFs on chain, like the S&P 500?
I'll tell you what I want
Nasdaq?
to see. So, when you look at statistics, right, and we get this question a lot, like, hey, why doesn't Injective just bring every stock on chain all at once? When you look at the vast majority, like, I think 70% plus of volume is concentrated among the major assets, right? So the S&P 500 plus like major stocks like Tesla, like the Max 7 stocks like Amazon. Um, so what I really want to see, and I think what's missing for US users and other users, is getting access to different um, assets from other nations. So not to give away too much information, but I'd love to see our platform introduce assets from China and Korea and London, because they're all disjointed and not connected markets, right? So the Nasdaq, the assets you can access is very different from what you can access from the London Stock Exchange, right? There's no interoperability in the real world. So if Injective wants to provide access to all asset pairs, it can't just be concentrated to major US companies. It needs to be sort of this global landscape. So seeing things like Alibaba or like big companies from Korea launch on Injective would be the next big things. And that's also going to happen this year. So very excited to see that on chain, because then a user doesn't have to pick and choose if they want to bet on Amazon or Alibaba. They can just do both through Injective and just take a overall bet on the e-commerce industry.
Rocky, anything to add? I see you on mute.
Yeah. Just to double tap on that, I think that is going to be a very exciting sort of narrative and sort of expansion for us. And let me just maybe tell a quick story. If I'm in the U.S. and I want to access let's say a stock listed on the Hong Kong exchange, right? Number one, I might not even have access to do that. Number two, if I do have access, the fees associated are almost prohibitive, right? Not only am I going to be paying like a acquisition fee for those types of shares, I'm going to be paying a monthly or quarterly maintenance fee just to be able to access those. So again, if I'm able to do that all on chain and not have to pay all those fees, why would I do so? That's like leveling up essentially the whole international space. And even if I go to Robinhood, which quote unquote has free trades, or any broker for that matter, there is still going to be these intermediaries that in the traditional finance realm are saying, well, we can provide access, but it's at a cost. And that cost, like I said, it can be very expensive and prohibitive for international users or US users trying to access international stocks. And so, yeah, without kind of giving away specifics, I think if people sort of want to tap in and continue to follow, they're definitely going to see a lot of these stocks from other nations that have tremendous volume, that have ton of eyeballs and sort of worldwide acclaim to them, but have otherwise been inaccessible to traditional users based on geographies, based on sort of the right brokers, the right intermediaries that they can access those through. And so it's really just about providing this cohesive expanse of access to these assets. And I think iAssets is perfectly positioned to kind of capitalize on bringing this vision to reality.
Nice, I love it, guys. Kind of coming up on time here, so I don't want to take too much more. So I want to end it off on a final note. Aside from everything that we've discussed, iAssets, trading volume, RWAs, Summit, etc., is there anything else you guys that you have in the pipeline that people can expect in Q2, Q3?
There's a whole lot. So from a product perspective, you're going to see a lot more, right? Like iAssets for sure. You're going to see a lot more assets brought on chain. You're going to see a lot of big institutional collaborations that we've been cooking up for quite a while go live. So for instance, in the last sort of like 2 months, we launched a bunch of different assets outside of just iAssets. For instance, we launched a tokenized fund with Nomura, which is one of the largest Japanese banks, and Libre. So we brought that tokenized sort of fund on chain, which I think is amazing. So you'll see a lot more experimentation beyond just bringing stocks or ETFs on chain. You'll see different asset classes from TradFi being brought on chain in the next couple months. You'll of course see the launch of EVM. You'll see a huge flourishing of the ecosystem because a lot more applications are being built. Right now, they're like sort of under wraps, but they'll all be revealed in the coming weeks and months. And I think it's really going to take our entire ecosystem to the next level because very quickly people will realize that they don't need to pick and choose between building on Ethereum or building on Solana or other chains. They can access the best assets from all chains. They can access the best applications from all chains, all via Injective. And I think that's really going to catapult us to new heights. So new assets, new dApps, new builders in the ecosystem. And on top of that, like some very, very unique products without giving away too much, they'll make it easier than ever to launch applications. So any community member, which that's why I brought up community in a big way on this call, can come in and launch applications on top of Injective with no coding experience. I think that's really what crypto is missing right now because it's still like largely opaque and largely technical. But I think the world of Web2 has simplified it, right? Like for instance, right now, my mom can go and use Facebook and she has no idea like about TCP IP or like how the internet works or how it functions. But in crypto, that's not the case. Like you need to know how private keys work, how MetaMask works, how all these things work, which I think is the huge bottleneck. And that's why we keep talking about the next billion users, but crypto doesn't even have like 10 million real DeFi users, in my honest opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Maybe there's 10 million wallets, but there's not 10 million real users. And I think breaking down those barriers is going to be our goal. And it's been our goal from day one. So how can we make it easier for people to come in and build applications and access applications? I think that will take crypto and Injective to the next level.
Rocky, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just to add on to that, a lot of alpha I think was dropped. So, if you're just now tuning in, I definitely recommend sort of rewinding and listening. But yeah, I mean, there are some things that are basically imminent to launch. You're going to see them, this week, and I think it's going to be a huge wake up call to both institutions and users to be able to say, "Wow, this is sort of next level." How do I get involved? And just to double tap also on the institutional side. I mean, in Q1, we saw, Google Cloud come in, we saw Deutsche Telekom come in, and these large, enterprise 10, $100 billion companies are wanting a piece of the pie. And so I think that trend is just going to continue. And I think that the more sort of primitives that we launch and the more sort of connections we make with these large institutions, the more sort of liquidity is going to flow. Retail exposure is gonna increase, and it's just going to be sort of a great sort of next year or two of innovation in crypto. And I think not to be cliche, but I think we're just getting started, and it's still sort of day one for us here at Injective. We're not going to rest until sort of we've onboarded the world, and so it's really exciting time. And I think for those that are not yet following sort of Injective and all that, definitely follow our Twitter. We're always sort of announcing sort of new primitives that you can get involved with, and just I guess for all those that are watching, definitely stay tuned.
I love to hear it. Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I want to thank you, Mirza and Rocky, for your insightful comments. I'm looking forward to diving into Injective next quarter.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Bye.